Alright, so we're now going to say goodbye to Marge and get rid of our image. And we're going to look at how we can add forms to our web pages. Forms allow your pages to be interactive and the users to enter data, tick boxes and click buttons. So they're really powerful and really easy to use. Let's see how we get started. As you might guess, there's a tag called form. And that's what we're going to use to create our forms. And then anything inside a form will be then part of that form. So a very basic element to have in your form is an input element. Now this is one of those self-closing tags again, so we don't need a closing tag, but let's just have a look what input on its own looks like. It's very simple, it's just a box. So it's a box and then you can start typing some text in there if you want to. So you might have something like username and then a colon and then your input, and it looks like that. Now the input tag here has several attributes that we can use, and the first one we'll look at is type. So we can have different types of input, and you can see quite a few of them being predicted for me there. So the first one I'll just show you is not test but text. So this is exactly what we've got here. So this is the default type, but really if you're going to use an input you should use a type regardless of whether you're using the basic type or not, just so that it's clear in your code that you want this to be a text input. But let's have a look then at some of the other types of input that we can use. In fact, we'll put that in a paragraph so that they'll all be on different lines. So let's create another input with a type of, and we'll first look at checkbox. And let's see then what that looks like. It's what you might guess, a simple tick box. So quite often you might see that next to, for example, if you're in a login form, there's often an option to stay logged in. And then you can decide with your checkbox whether or not you want to stay logged in. Another type of input is the radio input, which is not necessarily so obvious as to what it is. But let's take a look. You will definitely have seen them while going around the web. So it's very similar to a checkbox, but the difference is with each set of radio buttons, you can only select one of them. So for example, you might want to have one that says under 18, and then another that says over 18. Like that. Of course, you could have a whole string of different sets of ages, and they would only be able to check one of those. Now, if you try that, however, at the moment we can select both. And that's because we haven't linked these up in any way. Our code doesn't know that these are part of the same set of radio buttons. And we can link them up by giving them a name. So we might say age. So now that they both have the same name, if we now see how it works, if we click one and then select the other, you can see we can only select one of them. And again, if we had a whole string of these, we would only be able to select one of them if they all had the name age. And in fact, later on when we do more work with forms, we'll see that pretty much every form element should have a name so that you can refer to it and do something with it when the user submits the form. But to do that, you need a little bit more coding knowledge than we have at the moment, so we'll get there when we come to it. The next element we'll look at is the drop-down, and this actually works differently. It's not an input, it's a select. So let's see how this works. You can see we've got a select tag there, and then inside the tag we have our options. So let's say, for example, that we want to get the favorite food of our user. And yes, I am spelling that with a U. And let's just get our tabs looking nice. This is our first long bit of code, so it starts becoming more important that we set up our tabs nicely. You can see that that's nice and clear now that everything here is inside these paragraph tags, and then these option tags are inside the select tags as well. So let's pop a few foods in there. pizza. We'll have ice cream. And sandwiches. That should do. So let's see what that looks like. So you can see we've got a nice drop down there, and the user can select whichever one they want. Fantastic. The last one I'm going to show you is the submit button. So most forms are going to need this for the user to tell you that they've finished. So that's just another input type. And all we need to do is have a type of submit. Just like that. And then let's have a look. And then we've got a nice submit button at the bottom there. So this is a really nice basic form that uses several different elements. We've got a text input, we've got a checkbox, we've got a pair of radio buttons, we've got a select or drop down, and then we've got a submit button at the bottom. There are of course some other form elements, but these are the basic ones that you'll be using over and over again. Before we move on, I'm just going to show you a little bit how to customize some of these. So for example, we might not want the submit button to have the word submit on it. We might want it to have a different value or text. And we do that using value. So the value attribute. So we might want to have click me. Something like that. And that then changes the text on the button. The value attribute can actually be used in most of these as well. So for example, we might want to set a default username for some reason. If we wanted to do that, we just put it in as a value attribute on the username input like that, and then it would appear there and the user can get rid of it if they want to. Similarly, we could add a value attribute to the radio buttons so that code will know which one they've checked. So we might have something like value equals under 18 and value equals over 18. And then later on when we wrote some code to process that, we'd know which one had been selected by the user. Now, setting the value of username to your username isn't particularly useful because most people are then going to have to click there, select it, delete it, and then enter their username. So that's not a great way of guiding your users to do something. But if you do want to give the users a hint as to what to type in the box, you can use the placeholder attribute. Let's just have a look and see what that does. So it still puts your username in there, but you can see it's a bit faded. And then when you click in the box, and you can just start typing Rob, and that disappears straight away. So if you want to give the user a bit of guidance as to what to put in the box, then the placeholder attribute is a great way to do that. All right, two more things. First off, we might want to have this checkbox selected by default. And we can do that really easily by putting the word checked into the checkbox input as an attribute. It doesn't actually have a value, it just says checked. And then if we have a look, you can see it's checked by default. And finally, we can change which one of the three options appears as the default. So you can see pizza appears because it's at the top there. But if I want ice cream to appear as the default when the user loads the page, I just put an option of selected in there. And let's now have a look. You can see ice cream appears as the default one. And that's it. So for now, obviously your form doesn't do anything. When you click the form, you can see the page is reloaded, but we haven't written any code to actually process the form in any way. And we'll do that later on in the course. But you've learned about several different HTML elements and put them all together to make your first form. Congratulations. We're going to move on now to look at tables in HTML.